Hi everyone. Today I wanted to make a video to show how I am making a pair of socks using this 3D printed circular sock machine. And the files I got were from Printables, and I used an Elegoo Neptune 3 Pro 3D printer that I just got from Amazon. But I had noticed that there are some good videos, especially by Hella Knits on YouTube, showing how to put together the sock machine. But I noticed that there aren't a lot of videos on how to actually use it. So I wanted to put this together to help anybody who's struggling or just to save time for anybody trying to figure it out. And it took me a couple weeks, trial and error, just to figure out the best methods, for putting socks together. Just wanted to share what I've done, and also before I get started, I wanted to share what accessories I've used and some minor modifications to the machine that I did. Hopefully they'll be of use to you. So let me go over the accessories first. So I bought several items from Dean & Bean, and I'll show you these right now. The first one being, I bought these weights with these claws on the top. They're pretty heavy. These are for the heel when you're knitting the short rows for the heel and the toe. So those work extremely well to make sure you don't drop any stitches. Before I bought them, I was using these hanging claw clips to do that job, since I have another knitting machine that uses those, but those are not heavy enough. So these are actually very ideal. These are filled with some kind of weight, and it really does the job really well. So another thing I got from Dean & Bean was this soft weight. So this goes inside the sock as you're knitting it to help keep the yarn tension nice and snug so you don't drop any stitches. This is the largest sock weight that Dean & Bean sells. I tried making one on my own before buying it. So I used like a sock and I filled it with rice to weigh it down, but that wasn't heavy enough. I think this is almost 2 pounds or so. And so that's kind of a good weight. I think it's filled with ball bearings, so it's nice and heavy. Let's see, other thing I got from Dean & Bean was this little cincher tool. It's ratcheted here. So this will kind of cinch up the bottom of the sock as you're knitting it, and then you put so that it creates a closure so that you can put this soft weight on top of it. See what else. I also bought from them this pick tool. You can use tweezers, but I find this to be super useful for manipulating stitches. And let's see what else. Some ravel cord. So this is just a non-stretchy, slippery cord that you can use between the waist yarn and your sock yarn to separate them nicely when you're all done. Let's see, I think that's all that I had purchased from Dean & Bean. Other accessories I found useful are these stitch markers that you can open and close. These are Clover brand. You could also use safety pins. Also have a weighted clip. This one's in the shape of a lemon. I got from Amazon somewhere. Let's see what else. These are my favorite little pair of scissors. They're just useful. This one looks like a little bird. Also got that on Amazon. And one other thing, one thing I like to use in my socks is this. It's called cobweb lycra. So it's a thread that is stretchy, so you can see that. And so what I do is that I feed it in at the same time as the yarn, but I make sure it's tensioned when it's knit together, so that way when the sock stitches are knit together, it keeps it nice and snug. Let's see what else. One of the very first things I made on this circular sock machine was a setup on it. So there are YouTube videos on how to make one of these. So I just used a fingering weight yarn, a ribbon, and these little rings on the end. Let's see what else. The yarn I'm using, it's this really nice, this is a self-striping sock yarn. It is a combination of superwash, merino, and nylon. So that's the color I'm going to be using for the main part of the sock. And for the toe and the heel, I'm going to be using the corresponding pink color that came with it. And for my waist yarn, I'm going to be using a very bright contrasting color. So it's very important. So when you're doing the Kitchener stitch at the toe, at the end, it's really important that you can distinguish between the two yarns. Make sure you're picking up the right stitch. And these yarns I had purchased from Etsy, and it is tall pine yarn, and this color was called Emma. All right, so with that, I'll let me go over the machine first before I go into the knitting portion. So I made a few modifications. So you can see these little stoppers. So this is mainly for the ribber, so I'm not going to cover that today, but I plan to make a video in the future on how to use the ribber. This is just to secure them, so you don't have to worry about it for this video right here. One thing also is that I did not cut a hole in a table. So what I did was this piece, I printed it at 100% infill, so it was quite strong and sturdy. And then I just attached it to my table with some C-clamps. What else? I did not use the heel spring that was included in the files. I just couldn't get it to work the way I wanted it to work. So what I did was I attached, this is a tension spring wire, and I just bent a little hole at the end. That way I can feed yarn through it and it creates a nice little tension there. So I also have a Silver Reed LK150 knitting machine. See right over here. And it uses the same kind of device for tension. So that is another project area that, anyway, those are some of the modifications I made. I also, right here, I kind of filed a little space right here to make the yarn easier to slide into, because I just don't really like threading it into both holes there. I did that for this primary hole in the yarn feeder, but it turns out when I used the sock machine with a little slit in there, that the yarn would come out pretty easily, and that would cause some issues. So I ended up soldering, or basically melting the plastic back together, so that's why it looks kind of funny there. But I kept this one because it's that way I can only thread through one hole instead of two. So let's see what else. I found that the hardest part of assembling the sock machine, and you can't see it from here, but within this little component, there's a ball bearing little cylinder thing, and you have to put a metal rod through it. I had a very difficult time doing that. I don't have a lot of machinist tools at all, so I ended up sanding this stainless steel rod down quite a bit and pounding it in with a hammer as best as I could. And I don't have the means to cleanly, cut off this stainless steel nub, so that's why it's still there. So, but I found that part was the hardest part of putting this together, the most frustrating part. So, and I don't know if there's a way around it. Let's see. Now, as we start knitting with this, one thing that you need to make sure of is that when you turn the crank, that you see these needles go up and then go down. So you can see that as I'm turning it all the way around. Now, if you're in a situation where they are not going up and they are just staying flat across, so like for example, if I turn it the other direction, you'll see what's happening. You see that the needles, in fact, do not go up. They just stay level. What's happening in that situation is that these little levers here, you have to make sure that that inner lever, there, can you see it in there, is going underneath those little metal tabs in the latch hooks. And so the way to fix that, I'll show you how to fix that. So here's my, on the side, because I usually crank it so that the yarn feeder goes around counterclockwise. That's the main direction that I just like. So what you have to do, so you can see where that little tab ends, you have to lift up these needles to give it space so that it can start, I'll lift up a few more. So that tab that you can, it's hard to see here, that tab can start to go under these metal needles. So I think I did it there. And then, so now when I turn it again, see, oops, forgot a needle. So now you'll see that the needles now go back up before they come back down. So that's what you want. Okay. So let me put my camera down. All right, so now to begin knitting a sock. So the first thing we want to do is take your setup bonnet. So one thing that this is a setup bonnet made for, it's either a 60 or 64 needle cylinder. However, this purple cylinder I have here is 54 needles. And so there's a few extra rings on here, but that's fine, it'll still work. And so what you want to do is you want to place these rings around top of these stitch needles at every other. So you can just start with the one that won't fall down, and we'll just go every other needle. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way so you can see. Sometimes it helps to use your little pick tool if you can't get everything exactly as needed. One thing, make sure all of these little latch hooks are open. Sometimes you find one that gets stuck. Okay, just go through every other. Okay, and for this video, I'll show everything that I'm doing. I'm not gonna, cut away or do any breaks. That way you can see every single thing I'm doing to make a sock. So this video will probably be a little longer because of that. So now, sometimes the latch hook or the tool helps. Okay, and so you're gonna get to a point where the needles start dropping, and so at that point, just hold off for a minute. What you want to do, move these weights out of the way. You want to take your waste yarn. So this is in a bright neon color, and you want to feed it through one of these things. I don't put it through the heel spring at the start, so you want to feed it down, make it go through. Feed it through this yarn feeder, and what I like to do is just put it to the right side of that needle, make sure it gets hooked in there. And this is when I take my weighted clip, I'll just attach it like that. Make sure you take your soft weight and put it in here. And my cat is down here. He thinks he's gonna help me. Okay. All right, so what you wanna do now is just carefully, turn the crank You might want to just kind of tug on this yarn to make sure that your yarn is pretty taut as you're going, but not too tight. So you'll see that it catches maybe every other needle, and that's okay for the first round. And then once you get to about halfway, you can see that these needles that were once down have come back up. So what you can do is finish putting these little rings around every other needle just to finish what you had started. Okay. Oops. Sometimes attention to detail matters. Okay. And then there. Oops. Okay, and then just crank and make sure you're getting, at least getting every other needle for the first row. And then, you know, once you get to the second row, you should be able to catch all the needles now. If you don't, you can just, like what happened right there, I'll show you. See, this one dropped there. You can lift it up and just make sure it hooks on. And just make sure that all the way around every hook is grabbing the yarn, just like that. Okay. Oops, one fell. And that one fell. So it's a little tedious at first, but just make sure at some point that every needle gets the yarn hooked onto it. Okay, and that looks good. Okay. Okay. So I would recommend about 10 rows. After you have every stitch on every needle. Okay, that's about good. Oh, one thing I forgot when talking about setting up the machine is the tension. I wanted to bring it up before I got too far. So this thing right here, you want to make sure when you're just getting started that this plate, which is attached with this little hex bolt, make sure that's all the way up. So that's going to give you a looser tension. You don't want to have it all the way down. That'll give you too tight of a tension, and your yarn will just be angry and it'll be hard to crank, and when that happens, the yarn will ride up on each knitting needle, and you'll probably end up dropping stitches. It's best to just start with this all the way up and then adjust it, you know, as you see fit or according to the gauge that you want to achieve. But you know, every millimeter matters when adjusting this. So make sure that make it easy for yourself and keep that up at first. All right. Let's see. So now what I want to do is use some ravel cord. So ravel cord here, unfortunately it's a similar color to my waste yarn, but that'll be all right. So this is the interface between the waste yarn and your actual sock. And so the way I'm knitting here is top down. So I'm starting with the top cuff and then I'll end with the toe. And then when you're done knitting it on this machine, you Kitchener stitch the toe closed. All right, so now the next thing I want to do, I'm gonna cut my waste yarn off and give it about, you know, this much room there. What I'm going to do is just take that waste yarn through, closer there. Okay, and what I want to do is take the ravel cord, put it through here, and then make sure it's attached like that. So it's kind of crisscrossed. I'll show you that. Just like that. Okay. Now what you want to do is take your, all right. So what I have to do, I'm going to get the weighted clip, but the soft weight is on top of it. So I'm going to take the soft weight out. One thing to do, make sure you pull down on your setup on it while you're lifting out the soft weight. That way you don't pull up any stitches on the needles inadvertently. So what we want to do is take the weighted clip. And what I want to do is kind of hook these together, the ravel cord and the waste yarn, so that they kind of stay together, just like that. And replace the soft weight. It's kind of a struggle sometimes. Okay. And then you want to zoom out. You want to do one row of this ravel cord and make sure that it's catching correctly on every needle. And just go really slow, and if you see it not catching, you know, take the time to fix it. Make sure your ravel cord is long enough too. This one is just barely long enough. Oh, another thing with this machine, sometimes, at least on my machine, it feels like it's hard to turn sometimes, like it's tight or something like that. So what you can do is slowly move the cam instead of turning the crank, and that can usually break it free if it's like stuck. So what I'm doing is just putting my hand on the right side of the yarn feeder and just pushing a little bit. Sometimes that's enough just to get it free from whatever it's stuck on. Okay, and so when I am back here to where the waste yarn and the ravel cord were together, I take the other end of my ravel cord and just pull it through like that. All right. I'm gonna let go of the weighted clip for a minute. Gonna remove the waste yarn from the yarn mast. Now I'm ready to start with my project yarn. And so one thing I am using this cobweb lycra. So I want to feed the main yarn through this one and the cobweb lycra through this one. And then the cobweb lycra I'm going to put through this tension wire. The main yarn I'm not going to feed through it. I just find I get better results if I only have the lycra through the tensioner. Okay. Let's find the end. My web lycra got snagged, so I'm gonna just cut it clean on the wood. Okay. So one thing that I do just to make it easier is that I take the bottom. So now that you can see that the main yarn is through one side and the lycra is through the other and is up through the tension. So what I do is I just tie a little knot to make sure they stay together. Just makes it easier in the long run. Okay. Even if it's a little bit long, you can even snip it. Okay, so I've got them tied together, and then I'm going to feed it through the yarn feeder, maybe. Okay. And then what I want to do now is kind of like crisscross it, just like I did between the waste yarn and the ravel cord. Just like that. Okay. And then put them together with the weighted clip. Now one thing, I should have done it a step ago, but I'm going to remove the soft weight for a second. And I'm going to add this little cincher here, this cable cuff. So, let's see if I can get it. There we go. So what I'm doing is taking the bottom of the setup on it and putting the cincher, kind of as high up as it'll go and cinch it closed, and then put the soft weight back on, just like that. All right, so now we can also start our yarn counter. There we go. Okay, now one convention that I do is that, okay, so this yarn feeder is like right before the magnet, which increments every count. So I'm going to get it started so that and then reset it to 0 in just a second here. So you can see it already went to 1. I like the convention where it counts when you're done with a row, not when you start a row. So I'm going to clear it. And then I'm ready to go. So one thing you want to do is make sure that for these first few rows, just go really slow and make sure that the yarn is catching, make sure everything kind of looks and feels right, isn't too tight. You can see the spacing here in the waste yarn, and that's kind of like the amount of tension that you want. You don't want the gaps to be tighter than that or looser than that. That's kind of like what I found the ideal spacing. And if it is too tight or if it is too loose, what you want to do is change the height of that tension plate on the other side that I pointed out earlier. All right, so at this point we're starting the cuff. And so you're going to be, you can make it as long as you want, but I usually do 30 rows. And then we're going to fold it over and attach the stitches back around so that it's like a double layer. So that's why you want to start the counter. So you can go until 30 rows. And like I said, just go as slow as possible. One thing you want to make sure of is that the speed that, okay, and see here that I'm getting some kind of tension here. What you want to do is, in that situation, just push the cam itself instead of using the handle. That breaks free usually whatever's causing that tension. Sometimes it's this cobweb lycra that gets, because it kind of sticks on any kind of, if you have a jagged edge on the plastic or something like that, it'll get stuck. And so just be super gentle. Don't force anything. So you can see here, Look at this. So you don't want this. It's fixable. So if this happens, what I try to do is make sure that it's like on every other. So it's in front of one needle, behind one needle, in front of one needle, behind one needle. And as long as you catch that early, you'll be okay. It won't cause any major issues or miss stitches or anything. So. Okay. And just make sure those are get caught, that yarn gets, you know, onto every needle right there. Okay, and that worked. Okay. Well, like I said, the first few rows are the most critical. After you get about 5 rows, then you can start cranking a little faster. And I am on row number 3 at the moment. And I want to go to 30. Okay. All right, now I've gotten to a point where it feels more stable. So I can go a little faster. Sometimes the Lycra gets caught on the stitch counter, so I can just push it out of the way, and it's a little bit better. Okay, we're at 30 right now. Okay, so we're at the point where we want to do the work to fold that cuff over. So here's what you have to do. Take the soft weight out. So make sure you hold down on the bottom of the setup bonnet while you're pulling this out. Okay. Might as well take out that weighted clip just so it's not in the way. Okay. All right, now this part can be a little bit time consuming, and you have to be careful on what you do. Now you want to lift up just very gently. You don't want to lift so much that you're taking any of the stitches off these needles, but what you want to do is locate where your ravel cord meets your main yarn right here. Let me focus on that. So right here. So you want to take either your tweezers or your pick tool and make sure I have a good shot of this. And you want to find the working yarn. So it's this one right here. That is between both ravel cords. So this is the ravel cord and that's the ravel cord. So you want to get the working yarn that's right between it, lift it up, make sure you're not splitting the yarn, and follow up where its corresponding needle was. So I think it's that one. If you're off by one, it's not going to make that big a difference. So what you want to do now is take the next stitch, so it'd be that one, and hook it onto the next needle and go all the way around. This is probably the most time-consuming part. You want to make sure you do a good job here and take some patience. Okay. And this is also another reason why it's so important to make sure that your waste yarn is a different color than your working yarn. And in fact, like, make it very distinct. Just make it easier for yourself. Okay, I'll zoom back out so you can see in general what I'm doing here. After a while, it actually gets easier. Sometimes it'll get stuck because you're picking up the working yarn but not the lycra thread, and it's okay if you catch it or if you don't. Just make sure you have the working yarn attached to every needle. Oops, split the thread there. So I'm making sure I'm recording every one of these, because I know when I was new to this, I didn't want to see abbreviated videos. I wanted to see every mistake people made, even professionals, and see what they did to fix it. So that's why I'm recording every single step. So you can see if I make a mistake, how do I fix it? Because the difference between you know, successful knitting and unsuccessful knitting is how you deal with mistakes, because even professional knitters make mistakes. It's just how they fix them that matters. And I'm not a professional knitter. However, I've been knitting for 20 years, mostly by hand, but only recently I've gotten into machine knitting. Okay, while I'm doing this, one thing I forgot to mention at the start was you have to have your yarn on cones. So when I pointed out my yarn at the beginning, you probably noticed that they were nicely spun up on these plastic cones. So there's a particular tool that I bought for that. There's a company out of Massachusetts called Dreaming Robots, and they made a cone winder, and I have it on my table here. It's right there in the corner. That's an ingenious device that will spin up your yarn on these little cones here, and you can just go online and buy it. It's a few $100s, so it's kind of pricey, but completely worth it, especially if you're doing this a lot, or if you're doing any type of machine knitting. You just get better results. Your tension is more even when the yarn is feeding through. So, okay, so here you're coming to a point where all these needles are getting lower, so you can't attach the yarn. So what you're gonna have to do is knit some stitches, put this soft weight in, and then once you get to about here, these needles will be back up, and then you can complete the attaching those And again, anytime that you make a change, like if you're, attaching the bottom of the cuff, or in the future when we're doing the heel or the toe, after you do that, you want to make sure you're going really slow and really careful the next couple of rows after making any kind of change like that. So, and mostly because you want to make sure every stitch gets on a needle. Okay, so here now these needles are back up. What we can do, make sure you hold the bottom whenever you pull out a soft weight. Take your pick tool again, and you just want to finish attaching the working yarn stitches to the needles. So this is probably the 30th pair of at least attempted socks I've made on this machine. Okay, so you see here, do you remember when I had that mistake on the first row of the working yarn and I had to kind of snake it through every other? The impact of that is that you can see that there's, instead of 2 loops here, there's only 1. Let me zoom in on that so you can see that. So again, this is like showing my mistakes and how I fix it. So like I said, there is 1 loop here when there should be 2. So what I do in this situation is that I lift up that 1 loop, but I also take the next loop with it. And I put those both on that next stitch or next needle, so like that. It's a little bit tighter, but one thing, sometimes you have to put your hand underneath and help it out a little. And so what I want, this can be a little bit tricky. Just take that stitch, make sure that one's up there too. This is why it's important to go slow at the beginning so you don't have to spend time fixing your mistakes. Okay. So I want that one, that stitch, and that stitch. Just like that. There. Okay. Now I've gotten all the way around. Generally, you don't want that to happen. So actually put that larger loop only in one of the stitches. Keeping the one underneath it still there. Okay. All right, so what we do now, what you can do is, that little cincher tool, you can push it up before putting the soft weight back in. Okay, so at this point, clear your stitch counter. And so we just made the cuff. And so at this point you want to start making the length of the sock that is between the cuff and your ankle. Depending on how long you want it. I'm gonna make these socks go up to like mid shin, so I'm gonna do 80 rows, and that's about that'll get me there. Okay, so at this point, make sure this row that you're very careful that every stitch gets caught there. Sometimes the lycra will not get caught, so you can just kind of push it under if it didn't. sometimes like in this part, like right where you start the yarn and when the yarn feeder's there, it can get a little tight. So again, just push the cam itself instead of the crank, at least just for like an inch or so, and then you should be good. And try and make your speed as consistent as possible. Again, anytime you feel any kind of resistance, push the cam instead. Okay, and so you can see what's happened here. The yarn went on the other side of the needle, so make sure you fix that. Make sure it gets underneath those hooks. And yeah, once you get past the first few rows, these things don't happen as often. Okay. And I am still on row 2, so. And you can get it, you can feel when the machine is knitting very consistently as opposed to having some kind of like fits and starts feeling in the crank. And that's around, I think I'm on row 5 right now. So that it takes about 5 rows before you start feeling that more consistent knit. And so then you can start cranking faster, and I'm gonna go to 80 rows. But this is about as fast as I go. Mostly because the consistency and the speed is very important, and if you go faster, it just means that you have to be consistent at that faster speed, and it's not worth it if you make a mistake. You can see that the Lycra stopped getting attached. So it's not a big deal. Just put it behind all the hooks again, as much as you can. You won't really notice it in the final product. You can see it still got over here. Just put it behind these needles. Although it might cause some tension. So again, just move the cam itself by hand instead of the crank. Okay. You can see there's still some areas that it didn't catch. Just try and fix it as best you can. One thing, if you have to turn this cam by hand, make sure you're not pushing forward on that. Make sure you're doing completely just like this component of force in this direction and no components in this direction. Okay. All right, what row am I on? I am on row 21. Okay, I'm on row 40 right now, so you can see that the soft weight has dropped quite a bit. So this is halfway through the length of the top part of the sock. So what I'm going to do is take the soft weight out. I'm going to cinch up the little clasp and then put the soft weight back in. It can help with the tension in these stitches. So, and it just keeps things kind of neater. So make sure again that you're pulling down on the setup on it while you're lifting out the soft weight. Sometimes you have to undo, here, I can see this, undo the little clasp there to put it, above the cuff. There. So, and then lift it up. And then put the soft weight back. And again, anytime you change something like this, the next row, make sure you go slow. Just because you change something and it changes the tension. Row 43. Okay, so I'm going to keep going till I get to 80. I'm going to sit down a little bit instead of stand up. I'm on row 51, I think. I am on row 80. So now it's time to do the heel. So this is, it was the most tricky part for me when I first was learning how to knit socks on this machine. However, having the right tools makes a huge difference, and that's why having these I think they're called heel spring. No, not heel springs. Just the claw weights for the heel makes a huge difference. So highly recommend the Dean and Bean version of them. Now, one thing that I also didn't mention yet, but this is a 54 needle cylinder. And so what you want to do is mark, I just took a Sharpie, marked the halfway point. I'll show you. So I did a mark right there in between these needles. And you want to make sure there, in this case, there would be 27 needles on this side and 27 on that side. So there was another mark on the other side, you just can't see it. But at this point, what you want to do is lift up 27 needles. Maybe my tool here. Just make sure I didn't miscount. Okay. So I have half the needles raised in a hold position, and these are the needles I'm going to work for the heel. Now, you also have to separate these working needles into thirds. So I also did a mark, so there's 9 needles here, a mark, another 9, and then a mark, and then another 9. You know, depending on how many needles are in your cylinder, you know, just divide it as close into thirds as you can. So what you want to do next, again, take out the soft weight, cinch it up. And I always like looking under. You can see like how your sock is turning out, and that's just lovely. So okay, next thing you want to do is attach these heel weights. So you have to go underneath and put those claws right in, evenly spaced at first. Just like that. Okay. Cinch it up as much as you can. Replace, oh wait, let's not do that just yet. So with these needles in hold, what you can do, pull down, like put your hand underneath and just pull down and knit until you reach the end of the working needle, but such that it's still up, but the yarn feeder is past it. Now what you want to do, detach or cut your working yarn right here. And you want to get your heel color yarn. So that is this. And you want, don't cut the lycra, you can keep that. Take the heel yarn and just thread it in. Actually, you want to take that working yarn, put it in the middle here. Thread that through. And then you want to, again, you want to crisscross. Make sure something that goes that way, that it's crisscrossed like that. Then you want to take your weighted clip those together. And then replace your soft weight on top. Okay. So now you're basically going to be doing short rows to make the heel. So again, go really slow. And so, you know, go far enough that that last needle has gone down and come back up. And then once it has, lift it up. And then you're gonna just be going back and forth, just like that, lifting up one needle on every side every time. Okay. And while you're doing this, I like to kind of pull up just slightly on the yarn and the lycra right here to keep some amount of tension, because when you go back, you know, if you don't do that, you're gonna get loose tension here, but you want it to be a little bit more tight. Okay, and it's gonna be a little bit hard to turn. Again, you can just pull on, turn using the cam itself until you feel that it's a little bit more even. And just go back to this side. Okay, and when you see that last needle has gone down and come back up, and you'll notice it when this little thing goes back down, then lift up that needle. Just back and forth. Sometimes you can use a tool, lift it up. See how it went fast at the end? You kind of want to avoid that whenever it slips and goes super fast. Like sometimes when that happens, you get a drop stitch. So a convention that I use that I find really helpful is that I only lift up the needle right immediately before I start doing the next row. That happens because sometimes you'll have to adjust things and you might not remember, oh, did I lift up the needle or not? So what I always do is I do any adjustments, and then immediately before I knit the row, I lift up the needle, just so that I know whether I've done it or not. Okay. Lift up that needle. Again, sometimes it's tight and you just have to use. Okay, and you can see there's a little slight mistake. This one. So whenever that happens, I just tend to put it behind. Actually, no. Because it's only one stitch, it should work its way out. Okay. Now at this point, after a few rows, you have to adjust the heel weights. So take out the soft weight. You can just remove the weighted clip. What you want to do is put these little claws, get them up closer to where those needles and work are. This is where it's going to be finicky. You know, cinch up as best you can, put the weight back. And again, I didn't lift up the needle because I only lift that up immediately before I do the row. And now you want to go back and forth like this until you get to your mark. So I have you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more on each side to do. Okay. All right, we're over on the side. Lift that up. Again, I hate how it goes super fast at the end. It's just, you know, it's just a matter of control. And again, if you turn the cam with your hand, you tend to have more control. So one thing that can happen, you can see, look at that last needle. Look how the yarn is on that last needle. Looks like it's about to pop off. When that happens, you know, you can push it back. But that is a sign that you need to adjust your heel weights. So I'm gonna take a break and do that right now. So again, remove the soft weight, then take these heel weights and readjust them. Okay. So we've got 2 more rows on each side left. And this is the last one. Okay. So at this point, I know we just adjusted the heel weights, but do it again. It'll save you a lot of heartache than if you drop a stitch, which is always the worst. Okay. Make sure you cinch that up. Okay, so we're done with the decreases. Now we want to do the increases. So what you do, for the very first row, push down the first 2 needles and take the yarn and the Lycra, place it behind. Sometimes you need the tool to get it right. And make sure that yarn goes behind those 2 needles, just like that. And, okay. Again, go slow. Okay, and same thing on the side. Push down these first 2 needles and put that yarn behind it. So the reason why you're putting the yarn behind it is because it makes the heel look a little bit tighter and nicer, and it avoids some of the holes that you would get if you didn't do that. Okay, make sure that the latches are open. Okay. All right. Now from here on, when you increase, just push down 1 needle instead of 2. and but still put that, still put the yarn behind every needle. Again, you might want to push the can. All right, and again, it's important to readjust the heel weights. It just makes things a lot easier. And cinch it up whenever you can. Okay. Push that needle down. Make sure the yarn goes behind it. Make sure that latch is open. Okay. And then you just keep doing this until you get to the original halfway marks. All right, and again, I'm gonna adjust the heel weights. Okay, cinch it up. There. Got 2 left on each side. So I have 1 left on each side. So what you want to do, push it down and put the yarn behind it, but this time put the yarn behind the adjacent needle that's out of work. That'll prevent a hole in the heel at that junction. Same on this side too. You're pushing down the needle, put the yarn behind those 2. Okay. Make sure the needle's open. Okay. Oops. Sometimes that happens, that the yarn did not go under the hook. Didn't go under this one either. This happens sometimes. Your yarn just gets out of sync. Just want to make sure that it is in the hook. Just like that. And that one might be a little lost cause. I don't know. Okay, there. Just make sure that yarn gets in every hook. Okay, now that you've done your last short row, make sure you stop before you get all the way to the end, because what you want to do now, push down all of these needles. Now you want to do them before your feeder gets to that dividing point, because that, remember that little tab on the inside, it has to get underneath those metal nubs. And if you push these needles down too late, it won't get under them. So now what you can do, now turn it until you get to that halfway point, and you want to go back to your main yarn. So what you can do is cut that heel yarn, bring back your main yarn, thread it through, keep the lycra attached, don't cut that yet. Remove the soft weight. Sometimes it gets stuck on those little claws in the heel weights. Okay. So you want to pull that heel yarn through, and then you want to feed the main yarn back in. Okay. And again, make sure that they're crisscrossed. You don't really need the heel weight at this point because the soft weight can do that job. One thing that's really important whenever you switch yarns and then you turn the crank, make sure that both yarns are on top of the latch that's going to close there. Let's see if I can get it on camera. See this one? This one dropped below the latch, needs to go on top of it. Otherwise you're going to drop a stitch and cause a run. So, should be good. You can start turning it again. Keep the heel spring or heel weights in for, you know, at least 20 rows. Okay. So at this point, set your row counter to 0. And this is where you need to know how long to make your sock over your foot. So you need to know how that corresponds to your shoe size and things like that. So I do 60 rows, and I am a women's size 6 in the United States. So that's how many rows I need. So you need to increase or decrease depending on that. Could be trial and error. So I set my row counter to 0. I'm going to go 60 rows. Again, go super slow at the beginning for the first few rows. Just make sure you don't have any mistakes, or if you do, fix them quickly. See right there, for example, the yarn did not catch, so make sure you put it on the other side for that hook. So keep an eye on those types of things, especially for the first 5 rows after changing anything. So you can see I have some mistakes here now. You can fix those without it being quite a big deal. Again, just go every other. It's annoying, but it happens. And you know, once you're wearing the socks, you really won't notice mistakes like this. Make sure it's every other needle. Okay. I don't like that loop, so I'm gonna just hook it like that. It'll help hide it a little bit. Okay, I'm on row 7 out of 60. Okay, so it's starting to get a little bit easier. I think at this point you could probably remove these heel weights. Just make sure they don't fall on your feet because that does hurt. Okay, I'm on row 30. I'm halfway through the foot portion. I'm going to just cinch up the sock. Okay. All right, and then replace soft weight. And again, you can look and see how nicely your sock is coming along. 30 more rows to do before we start the toe. am at 60 rows, and so now I can start the toe. For all purposes here, the toe is pretty much exactly like the heel. So what you have to do, you have to put half of the needles out of work and then just do the short rows back and forth. The only difference comes at the very end, and I'll point that out. But so what I'm going to do next, take half of those stitches or needles out of work. So in my case, that's 27. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to switch my yarn so that the toe yarn matches the heel. So I'm going to cut the main yarn and remove it. Take the other yarn, feed it in. Okay, so take that main yarn, pull it through, keep the lycra as it is. Before I do that, actually, remove the soft weight, cinch it up, put the weights back on. And then feed through the yarn for the toe. Again, you want to crisscross it with the main yarn. Make sure both yarns are above the latch so that you don't get a drop stitch. Okay. Put the soft weight back, and then just do the short rows like we did before with the heel. So in this case, when you're decreasing, just lift up one needle every time. After a few rows, especially when you see the yarn start riding up some of the needles, that's an indicator that you need to adjust the weights. And cinch it up as much as you can. Okay. I'm gonna, again, put the weights up higher. Cinch it up. Okay, I've got 3 more needles to decrease on each side. this is the last one. Okay, so so I did all the decreases, now we're gonna do the increases, but again, I'm going to move the weights. Cinch it up. Okay, and just like before, the very first round of the increases, you want to push 2 needles down and then wrap that yarn behind the needles. And you might want to move the cam because they can be a little tight. You can see here that that needle actually did not catch the yarn. That's okay though, it's only 1 stitch, you won't notice it. But those mistakes happen. Okay, and again here, put 2 needles down and then put the yarn behind it. And again, you might want to move it with your hand because the tension is kind of tight. And then you just decrease with just 1 needle at a time. Put the yarn behind the needle. Again, adjust the weights. Cinch it up. Come to visit. All right, and then let's again move these heel weights. Might not seem like you're moving it much, but it is making a difference, especially when you're putting these weights right under the first needle that's in work. It really helps with the tension. Let's see, we've got 3 more needles on each side. Okay. And here is the last row. Now, remember for the heel on the last increase row, we put the yarn around 2 needles, but we're not going to do that this time. We're just going to keep it behind, the working needle. That's because you don't have to worry about the hole that comes if you didn't do that with the heel, because we're going to Kitchener the toe shut and that won't happen. Okay. So at this point, don't go too far because you want to push down all the needles. Make sure all of the latches are open. Okay, and then just go a couple more until you get to the halfway point. Uh-oh, my cat's playing with the bottom of the sock. And so at this point, you want to do just one more circle before we transition to the waist yarn. And then you are done with your very first sock. Okay. And again, because something changed, make sure you just go very slowly. Okay, make sure that every latch is open. That one was closed. Now get to the point where you can see, where there's a little gap right there between when you did the toe. So that's where you want to stop your working yarn and then start your waist yarn. Okay. So now at this time we're gonna cut the lycra as well. And it'll just kind of bunch up. Okay. Oh, one thing before you cut your working yarn, pull out about a yard's worth because you're going to use that yarn to Kitchener shut so that you have no knots when you do that. So just pull out just a decent amount. It's better to have more than less. And cut it. And see, remove all the stuff. The soft weight. What you gotta do is feed through that working yarn because you have to feed in the waist yarn. Okay. And keep the heel weights in there for now. It's best just to not modify them at the moment. Sometimes the yarn gets caught on these needles. Just be careful. Okay, now for the waist yarn. It's nice neon green color. Okay, again, feed it in. So the difference between the toe and the heel this time is that when you're feeding in the waist yarn, don't crisscross it. See how I have my working yarn is ending there. You want your waist yarn just to start like that. Don't crisscross it. It's easier when you do the Kitchener stitch if you don't. So now do about 10 rows or so. Put your soft weight back in. Again, make sure that, so you don't get a run, make sure that this working yarn is above the latch when you turn it. Otherwise it's going to drop the stitch, cause a run. So what you can do is make sure that when it closes that it's catching. See, like right there. And it did not catch, so here, let me show you. You zoom in on it, right there. This pink yarn has to go in that clasp. Otherwise, it'll run, you won't know, and you'll, your toe will have a run in it, and it'll be extremely frustrating because you just spent the last hour and a half working on a sock only to have to spend another hour to repair it. So that's why it's important to go slow and pay attention to everything as you're doing it. Okay. Okay. Again, go slowly. even with the waste yarn, is important. So you want to do 2 rows of waste yarn, and then we're going to set some stitch markers that will help when you do the Kitchener stitch. Okay, that's 1 row. So now you want to get your stitch markers. You need 4 of them. So what you want to do, let me show you specifically. So you can see that little gap. That's not a run. It's just how it goes together because we didn't crisscross those stitches. You want to put the stitch marker through your main working yarn right there on that side of that gap, and you want to do the same thing for the working yarn on this side of the gap right there. Let's see if I can not get my hand in the way. Well, I think you can see what I mean. You want that stitch. So I'm gonna put that on the camera. All right. There. You want to do the same thing on the side. So you can see that you do have somewhat of a gap there. It's not a mistake, it's just how it happens when you finish the toe. And you want to put your stitch markers on this one and this one. Okay. All right, so now do some more rows with your waste yarn, and then we are done with the first sock. Again, go slow. Waste yarn is important to make sure that, you know, as your stitches come off, that you have enough margin so that even if you do get some runs in the waste yarn, that it's not going to impact your main yarn. I'm going to call that good. The next thing I'm going to do, so what you can do is start the second sock right on top of this. So the next thing I'm going to do is add ravel cord for the next round, and then just redo everything like I did for the first sock. And you start with the cuff, fold it over and attach those stitches, do the length above the ankle, do the heel, do the length of the foot, and then the toe, and then close it off like we did here. So Dean and Bean have videos on their YouTube channel that go into detail on how to Kitchener the toe shut, and they use these the convention that uses these 2 stitch markers on either side. So I recommend looking that up. But yeah, that is how I made my sock, and I will post pictures on the Printables website to show, well, the link to this video as well as my finished pair of socks, and you can always look below and see how your product looks, get a sense for it. So, all right, thanks for watching. I know this was a long video, but hopefully it was helpful to you. All right, thanks.